Kesubos Daf Kuf Yud Vez is the last daf in the Masechta. It's about 3/4 of a daf, and it continues discussing the future and the times of Eretz Yisrael and the greatness of the fruits of Eretz Yisrael during that time. So we'll speak a little bit about the fruits of Eretz Yisrael today and the fruits of Eretz Yisrael at the time when Mashiach will come and other things which will happen when Mashiach will come in Olam Haba. So the Gemara begins and says, Rabbi Chober, Rabbi Vir, and Rabbi Chanina went to a certain place in Eretz Yisrael, and they brought him a large peach, which was as big as the frying pans of Kfar Hino. Gemara says, how big is that? That's the size of Chamesh Sa, large size. And they were able to eat a third of it, and a third of it they had to just leave over Hefker, and a third of it they gave to their animals. A year later, Rabbi Elazar came there, and they brought him a peach, but it had already gotten smaller, and he was able to hold it just in his hand. And he quoted a pasuk relative to that, which said, Eretz Prilam Lecha, Mira'as Yoshveva. The fruit of the land has gotten salted, has gotten dried out because of the evil of the people who live in it. You see that the quality of the fruit is decreasing. Similarly, the Gemara says Rishu ben Levi went to Gavla, and he saw that there were clusters of grapes which were so large that they looked like calves. So he said, oh, there's calves between the grapevines. They said, no, it's clusters of grapes. And he commented, he said, Eretz, land of Eretz Yisrael, bring in your fruits, meaning minimize your fruit. Why are you putting out so much fruit? Who are you doing it for? Is it for the Goyim that are on top of us because of our sins and giving us our time? Why are you giving out your fruit to them? And a year later, Abchia came there, and he saw that the clusters were not so big anymore. They're no longer the size of calves; they were the size of goats. But he said, "Oh, look, there are goats between the grapevines," and they said to him, "Go, get out of here! Don't do the same thing to us like the guy who was here before you did, like your friend did. He commented and made the land decrease its produce. We're afraid you're going to do the same thing." When I brings the brisa, it says that in its blessings, Eretz Yisrael has one base saw of land can produce 50,000 kur, tremendously large measure of grain. So how do you learn that? The Gemara says you learn that out of a combination of our observations of Beit Sha'an and Soan, which was the most fruitful city in Mitzrayim. So we know that in its most settled and civilized state, Soan Mitzrayim must have had at least one base saw making 70 kur. How do you know that? Because you have a brisa where Rabbi Meir says, I saw that in the valley of Beit Sha'an there was a field that made 70 kur. The Gemara has said elsewhere that Beit Sha'an, although today it's part of Eretz Yisrael, Beit Sha'an at the time was not part of Eretz Yisrael. That therefore indicates that Soan in Mitzrayim has to be producing at least 70 kur, because it has to be producing at least as good as any other land which is outside of Eretz Yisrael, because Soan is the best land in the world. How do we know that? Well, Mitzrayim is the best land in the world, like it says in the pasuk, Kigan Hashem Keretz Mitzrayim, calls Mitzrayim the garden of Hashem. Therefore, you don't have anything better than Mitzrayim, and the best land within Mitzrayim is the region of Soan, because that's where the kings used to live, like it says, Ki Hayu B'Tsoan Sorav. Now, we also know that the worst land in Eretz Yisrael has to be producing better than the best land in Eretz Mitzrayim, and the worst land is Hebron, which is rocky, and that's why they bury people there. And it's got to be better, at least 7 times better than Tzon Mitzrayim, because the pasuk says V'Chevron Sheva Shanim Livna Solefnei Tzon Mitzrayim, which simple pshat that means that Hebron was built 7 years before Tzon Mitzrayim. But that can't be, because Hebron was built for Canaan, who lived there, and Canaan was a younger brother of Mitzrayim, as the pasuk says, Uvnei Cham Kushim Mitzrayim Potu Canaan. So Canaan is the youngest. Therefore, it could not have been built before Mitzrayim. Cham would not have built a city for his younger son before his older son. Therefore, that cannot be the simple pshat. The correct pshat has to be that it is 7 times better in quality than Mitzrayim, and therefore the land of Hebron the rocky soil of Hebron has to be at least 7 times better than the best soil of Mitzrayim. So 7 times 70. If you get 70 kur out of Tzon Mitzrayim, if you get 70 kur out of Beit Sha'an, you have to get at least 70 kur out of Tzon Mitzrayim. 7 times better than that would be 490 kur, and this is for the rocky soil of Hebron. And if you weren't on rocky soil, it would have to be better than that, so we can round it up to, let's say, 500. And that's when there's no bracha, but when you have bracha, then it's 100 times more, like it says, V'Yisrael Yitzchak B'Eretz Ahi, V'Yimtza B'Ashana Ahi Mea She'or V'Yivarcheu Hashem at the time of bracha, you get 100 times more. Therefore, it's 500 times another 100, which is 50,000. Therefore, time of bracha, the good land in Eretz Yisrael will give you 50,000 kur. Now, the Gemara brings another brisa where we say that Rav Yosi said that a saw in Yehuda used to make 5 saw of flour. 5 different types of saw. The 5 saw are: 1 saw of kemach, which is the simple flour, the early flour that comes out when you first grind. Then you have a saw of silas, that's fine flour from after you grind it the second time. Then you have a saw of subin, that's bran, that's the shells that are ground up. A saw of morsan is heavy bran, and a saw of kiburia, that's the tough stuff that's left over at the end, for which you make black poor man's bread. Now the Gemara says there was a tzeduki that said to Rabbi Chanina, it's very good that you people praise your land, you praise Eretz Yisrael, because one base saw I got in Eretz Yisrael, and my father left it for me, and I was able to get, part of it was able to make me oil, part of it grew wine, part of it grew grain, part of it grew beans, and part of it I let my animals graze on. I was able to get a lot of things out of that one piece of land. Now there was an Amorean person who spoke to one of the Jews when they first came to Eretz Yisrael, and he asked him, how much did you get from that fig tree? And he said, we got 60 kor out of that fig tree. So the Amora said, this is an Amorean, not an Amora, but an Amori. He said, you just got into the land, you're already destroying it. We used to get 120 kor out of it. So the Jew said, yeah, when I said 60, I meant 60 from one side of it, and I really got 120 kor out of it as well. The Mepharshim explained why he did not want to tell them really how much he was getting out of it until he kind of worked it out of him. Says Rav Chizda, what is meant by the pasuk in Yirmiyah that says Ve'etin l'cha eretz chemda nachalas tzvi? Why is Eretz Yisrael called tzvi? There's a couple of different reasons. A tzvi, when you take off its skin, you skin it, the skin contracts right away, and it does not seem to be able to have fit the entire deer. Tzvi is a deer, the entire deer within it. Also, Eretz Yisrael does not seem to be able to withhold all its fruit. When you pick the fruit, there isn't even space in Eretz Yisrael to store it all. Also, a deer is the lightest, meaning the swiftest of all animals. Eretz Yisrael is also the swiftest to ripen its fruits. And you may therefore think that a tzvi, a deer, because its fruit, its flesh is not oily, it's not fatty, you may think that Eretz Yisrael's fruits are also not quality. But to counteract that, it's called Zavas Chalav V'Davash, Shemenim Mechalav Umetukim Midvash. It is called the land of flowing with milk and honey, fattier than milk and sweeter than honey. Says Rabbi Eliezer. The Gemara says Rabbi Elazar, when he would go to Eretz Yisrael, he would say, I'm saved from one meaning from one curse. When he got to Micha, he said he was saved from a second curse. And when they told him the Sod HaIbor, the secret of how to calculate adding an extra month, he said, I was saved from a third curse. So what's he referring to? Referring to a pasuk in Yecheskel. It says, "V'haisu yadi el hanaviyim hachozim shav v'hakosmim kozav b'sod ami lo yu." So b'sod ami lo yu, that is saying that they're not going to know Sod HaIbor. This is the curse that people won't know Sod HaIbor. B'ksav Yisrael lo yikasevu, v'admas Yisrael lo yivayu. Admas Yisrael lo yivayu, that it teaches they won't be able to get to Eretz Yisrael at all. And that he was saved from that as well. That means he won't get Iksav Smicha, but once he got that, so again, he was saved from all three of these things. Says the Gemara, when Rabbi Zera got to Eretz Yisrael, he could not find a ferry to take him across the river, so he put a plank across, and he had a rope stretched across, and he walked across the plank while holding on to the rope. And it was a tzeduki that said, you are a rushing people, you always rush, your mouth rushes before your ears, like referring to when we said Nasa v'nishma, we'll do before we even hear. So he says, you're still rushing, why don't you wait till the boat came? And Rabbi Zera said, if Moshe and Aaron couldn't get into this land, who says I'll be able to get into it if I don't grab the first opportunity? So I definitely cannot wait for the boat to come. Rabbi Abba would kiss the stones of Eretz Yisrael. B'chanina would fix the roads of Eretz Yisrael in order that people shouldn't get stuck somewhere or complain about them, have anything negative to say. Rami and Ravasi would move from the sun to the shade during the summer so that people shouldn't be hot and shouldn't chas v'shalom have reason to complain about Eretz Yisrael. They would move from the shade to the sun during the winter so that people shouldn't be cold and have any reason to complain. Rabbi Chia bar Gamda would roll in the dirt of Eretz Yisrael, like it says, Ki rotza avodecha esavanel v'safari chanenu, the Klal Yisrael will love and will have tremendous grace out of the stones and the dirt, the dust of Eretz Yisrael. Says Rabbi Zera, Rabbi Yirmiyah Bar Abba used to say that the generation in which Mashiach will come, there will be terrible tragedies, and people will be against the Talmid Chachamim. And when I said it before Shmuel, he said it's going to be Gzeros upon Gzeros, decrees upon decrees, like it says in the pasuk in Yeshaya, V'od ba Assyria, Veshava, V'hoisa Levar. There'll be a 10th time will come, and it will happen again, and there'll be destruction again. This is all referring to the time just before when Mashiach will come and will have Chevle Mashiach. Rabbi Yosef called it Zuzi ubezuzi de bezuzi. You'll have the people who plunder and the plunderers of the plunderers. Now, the Gemara would really end the Masechta here, but the Gemara doesn't want to end off on a negative note, so the Gemara quotes again what Rashi said in the name of Rav. In the future, when Mashiach will come, all the non-fruit-bearing trees of Eretz Yisrael will start bearing fruit, and will have tons of fruit, like it says, Ki eitz nasa pirio te'eno v'gefen nasnu chelam. Two things will happen. You have the eitz nasa pirio, each tree will give its fruit, the te'ena and the gefen, the fig tree, and the grapevine will give their strength. You have two different things. You have the fruit trees giving fruit, and you also have the eitz nasa pirio, the tree, which is besides for the fruit trees, which we know about. The regular trees will also give fruit, and therefore we will have fruit aplenty in the time of Mashiach, when Mashiach will come. That is the end of Maseches Kesubos. Hadran Allah Shnei and Exeris V'Stigla Maseches Kesubos. Hadran Allah Maseches Kesubos V'Hadrach Alon. Da'atan Allah Maseches Kesubos V'Da'atach Alon. Lo'Nis Neshem Minach Maseches Kesubos V'Lo'Sis Neshem Minan Lo'Ba'al Madain Lo'Ba'al Madasi. Hadran Allah Maseches Kesubos V'Hadrach Alon. Da'atan Allah Maseches Kesubos V'Da'atach Alon. Lo'Nis Neshem Minach Maseches Kesubos V'Lo'Sis Neshem Minan Lo'Ba'al Madain Lo'Ba'al Madasi. Hadran Allah Maseches Kesubos V'Hadrach Alon. Da'atan Allah Maseches Kesubos V'Da'atach Alon. Lo'Nis Neshem Minach Maseches Kesubos V'Lo'Sis Neshem Minan Lo'Ba'al Madain Lo'Ba'al Madasi.